Hey friends, welcome back to Pastor Kevin at the First Church of God for Midweek Encouragement. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to look at the miracles again, and today we look at a great one, and I think it'd be fun not just to look at the New Testament miracles of Jesus, but I think of a lot of miracles that happened in the Old Testament as well. I love Old Testament stories because of the miracles, axe heads floating, people being raised from the dead, food falling out of the sky, just all of these great things. But I love the New Testament because with Jesus, we see his love, his compassion, and Jesus did miracles, and people didn't even realize what he was asking them to do. And I want to look at one in the book of John, chapter 5. And before we look at this miracle, what do you define a miracle as? What's the key purpose of a miracle? And I think a miracle, really what it does is it points back to Jesus and his power and his love. And it shows us how that when we walk in faith, the power that can happen. So John chapter 5, sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here, a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and he walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and the law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had made him well. So, what was the miracle that took place? The man began to walk. But and what was the tipping point of what took place? I think one of the things that we cannot overlook in this passage is where it took place. It just happened to be at Bethesda. It was more than that it was at Bethesda. It was more than it was at the pool. But it's where the pool was located that fascinates me, near the sheep gate. And that's very significant because this is where the sheep were brought in for sacrifice at the temple. And on this day, Jesus, the perfect Lamb of God, made his way through. He was the complete and final sacrifice to walk through that gate. The pool of Bethesda was not like a local swimming hole. It was a place of lost hope. There was a thread of hope for those who were there. They hoped that when they could be the first one in the water, because when the water was stirred, they believed that the healing would happen. They believed that an angel's wing had touched the pool and first one in got healed. Well, Bethesda, it's interesting. It means house of mercy or house of grace. And lounging around these 5 porches that were next to the pool, the ill people waited and they watched for the angel to stir the water. And hopefully the diseased people at the poolside believed that the first person in, we're going to be okay. Well, I think that the key thing for us to look at in this miracle of Jesus is he says, "Do you want to get well?" But I find it interesting, Jesus approached the man. The man didn't approach Jesus. We don't read of him calling out to Jesus like blind Bartimaeus, who said, "Son of David, have mercy on me." This man was just sitting there. Jesus says, "Do you want to get well?" And the man made these excuses. And I think that's where we find ourselves sometimes. Jesus wants to know if we want to get well, but we keep making excuses and all the reasons we can't. I've often said an excuse is the truth wrapped up in a lie. And if opinions are like armpits, everyone has at least 2 and they both stink, well, what are excuses like? If there's somebody that could have a good excuse for the misery they were in life, I think it might be George Washington Carver, who he wasn't supposed to live. Somebody tried to kill him as an infant, probably killed his mother as well. But I'm not going to tell you his whole life story. I think you ought to read it because it's an amazing story of God speaking into a man. But here's a man, and this is what he said. 99% of failures come from people who have the habit of making excuses. 99% of failures come from people who have the habit of making excuses. Excuses may be like a quick fix, but they only create distance between two people. You can have excuses or you can have success, but you can't have both. Excuses can be habits, and habits can become a way of life. Jesus said, do you want to get well? Are you ready to give a definite yes? In AA and Celebrate Recovery, we say you are as sick as your secrets. So keep in mind, there is going to be a day when all secrets are revealed. And if you want to get well, you must be willing to identify the situation that's in the way. Oh, yes, our yes to Jesus can't be full of excuses. Jesus doesn't embrace excuses, and neither should we if we claim to be his followers. Excuses we make for ourselves, or the excuses we make for others, an excuse is the truth wrapped up in a lie. Just say that you want to get well and stop putting conditions and excuses on your desire to get well. Look at what Jesus did. He didn't listen to the excuse. He says, get up. Jesus doesn't embrace excuses. He sees right through them. And I think Jesus has healed several people. They just haven't gotten up yet. They've gotten so used to being put down, beaten down, and ignored. It hasn't happened so long that it has become a place of resting. It's all they know. Excuses have been where we have lived for too long, and we haven't lived out the life that God has for us. Jesus says, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. Do you want Jesus? Do what Jesus told this man to do. Pick up your mat and walk. What do you feel the mat might symbolize for you today? Something of value, something you treasure, something you need? I see at least two miracles in this passage that took place when Jesus said, take up your mat and walk. One, he did it, and then two, he was able. Walking is a learned behavior. We don't come out of the womb walking. We have to learn how to walk. We have to build the muscles to walk. And because he had been in this paralytic position for 38 years, there had to be muscle deterioration and other physical limitations that might have happened. Immediately, though, he stood up and he walked. Both learned behaviors that require muscle movement. It didn't take long before the religious leaders picked up on this and started making a stink. This was on the Sabbath. It was a day of rest. And you told him to do work. Foul on you, Jesus. For us, we've got to tune out the doubters. We've got to tune out the naysayers, the jealous of our faith people, the ones who are constantly giving you direction that need to work more on their own life than they do on other people's lives. They need to stay in their own lanes. Too many others don't want you off of your mat, maybe because they want you to want them and need them. They may appear more secure than they really are. They don't realize they are keeping you from stepping out in faith where Jesus wants you to walk. There are going to be people who want to give you words of correction constantly. Proverbs 12:25 says, anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. We need to be people who give words of affirmation, not correction. I've received enough constructive criticism in my life to build a few houses. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, therefore be an encouragement to one another. And I have heard the phrase that when you read the word therefore in the Bible, you need to ask the question, what is there therefore? 1 Thessalonians 5, starting in verse 4, but you, brothers and sisters, are not in darkness so that this day should surprise you like a thief. You are all children of the light and children of the day. We do not belong to the night or to the darkness, but then let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be awake and sober. For those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk at night. But since you belong to the day, let us be sober, putting on faith and love as a breastplate and the hope of salvation as a helmet. For God did not appoint us to suffer wrath, but to receive salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. He died for us so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with him. We're to encourage each other, and we are to encourage each other to step out in faith. We are to build each other up in faith. There are some people who shouldn't be given any spiritual, marital, financial, or health advice until they get their own house in order. I'm not throwing the constant correctors out. They have a place. They believe that they're being helpful. Unfortunately, they're not. They're stirring something, and it isn't the water in the pool. We need to give them grace. We don't need to be like them. James 1:19 says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." The Pharisees get thrown under the bus all the time. They were insecure in trying to figure it all out, yet Jesus loved them anyway. I think a lot of times Jesus wanted them to really figure it out. He had so much hope for them. Let's lose the excuses, because Jesus wants to know, do you want to get well? Jesus says yes or no. And if you say yes, do what he says. If you've been saying yes, but acting no, just sitting by the pool going, I want to get well, but stop. Pick up your mat and go someplace. Pick up your mat and get moving. Later, we meet him again, and he had told the Pharisees he didn't know who the man was that healed him. And I'm sure that when he saw Jesus, he said, or he thought, I remember you. And Jesus said, stop sinning, or something worse is going to happen. And I think God is speaking. And I think we need to be listening. And if we don't feel he is speaking to you, you might need to see if there's wax in your ears, something that is blocking you from hearing him. Don't give up. Slow down. Get quiet and listen. Invite him to search your heart and your mind. Guard the gates of your eyes and the gates of your ears, because they are avenues to your heart. And out of the abundance of the heart, your mouth will speak. Do you want to get well? Jesus didn't tell him to do any more than to get up and walk. What is Jesus telling you? I think we all want healing for something. And when I think of healing, it isn't just for a physical issue, but maybe of an emotional, mental healing from a hurt caused by someone else, or even because of your own disobedience and rebellion or independence. And the problem isn't always our inability to access God's power. Sometimes it's our willingness to believe it and engage with it. The man in the miracle was a work in progress, just like each and every one of us. He was filled with reasons why he wasn't healed yet, and excuses why he couldn't change. Sometimes these stories are like a mirror, too often of our own reflection. What has God told you to get up and walk away with? What has God already healed in your life and set you free from, and yet you keep setting on your mat? Ask God to help you hear his voice and not your own excuses. Blessings.